on my son's birthday. He told me the best gift I could give him was to disappear from his life forever. I didn't argue. I didn't question it. I simply walked away and let him celebrate with the people he preferred. 1 hour later, police cars surrounded my yard. Officers poured into my property, and my son was handcuffed in front of everyone he knew. What happened next was something no one, especially him, ever expected. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and tell us where you're listening from in the comments. The chocolate birthday cake balanced in my left hand as I tried to open the back door. 28 candles waited inside the kitchen drawer, ready to be lit. Under my right arm, I carried the wrapped gift, a vintage watch my father passed me, something my son, Evan Turner, had admired months earlier, without knowing I planned to give it to him. The frosting on the cake had taken me hours, and the watch had taken me years to part with emotionally. Today was supposed to be simple, just his 28th birthday. From outside, I heard laughter. Evan's voice mixed with the voices of his friends, Tyler, Ben, Maddie, and a few others whose names I was still learning because Evan rarely introduced anyone properly anymore. The late April air carried the smell of grilled burgers, cheap beer, and the sounds of loud music coming from the speakers I bought. I paused before opening the door. I didn't want to interrupt a moment that seemed fun for him. Most parents would smile hearing their child laughing with friends. But lately, I felt something else, a distance that kept growing whether I acknowledged it or not. "Dude, your dad went all out," Tyler said clearly. His voice carried across the yard. New sound system, expensive beer, the whole setup. Ben added, "He's trying to buy your attention again, I guess." Evan took a long drink from his bottle. "Yeah, he thinks buying things makes up for everything. He's convinced money fixes anything he screws up." The cake nearly slipped from my hands. Maddie chimed in without looking up from her phone. "At least he shows up. My dad stopped trying years ago." Evan shrugged. "Yeah, well, Mark doesn't get it. He's on my case constantly. Get a job, be responsible, move out, stop mooching, take life seriously. He's been giving me lectures since I was 12. I stiffened at the sound of my own name. Not Dad. Not my father. Just Mark. Said casually. Said like I was a burden. I kept listening. Tyler said, "Man, if my old man paid my bills, I wouldn't complain. Free house. Free utilities. Free everything? You got it sweet." Evan didn't hesitate. I didn't ask for any of it. He thinks I owe him something. Honestly, the best gift he could give me is to disappear from my life forever. The words were so sharp, so casual, so shockingly easy for him to say that I felt the air leave my lungs. 28 years of being a father. 28 years of giving everything. And the sentence he said so easily hit harder than anything else I had heard in years. Ben laughed, lifting his beer bottle. "Damn, dude, that's cold." Evan smirked. "It's just the truth." The gift slipped from under my arm, but I caught it. The watch inside suddenly felt like a useless piece of metal. My father wore that watch through decades of hard work. I wanted to continue that tradition by passing it to my son. But hearing him talk made the gesture feel pointless. Maddie finally looked up. "You could move out, you know." "With what money?" Evan scoffed. "He controls everything. House is his. Bills are his. Car is his. Everything is his. But at least I get free rent out of it." Tyler laughed again. "Yeah, man, milk it while you can." They all laughed. I stood behind the glass door, a 62-year-old man holding a homemade birthday cake like an idiot. I had spent the morning decorating the dining room, setting out the candles, arranging gifts, and imagining that this birthday might be a small chance to reconnect. I felt stupid. The memories rushed back fast. The graduation party where he introduced me as the ATM. The Christmas where he didn't look up from his phone. The job fair where he sabotaged interviews and said, "Why would I work when you pay for everything?" The times he used my credit card without asking. The times he rolled his eyes when I spoke. It all made sense now. I had ignored the truth for years. He didn't respect me. He didn't appreciate me. And now he wanted me gone. I stepped away from the door, holding the cake tightly, the frosting smudged against my shirt. I looked at the kitchen decorations I had set out, balloons, a banner, All of it. It suddenly looked childish, even pathetic. I walked to the counter and set the cake down. My hand shook slightly, not with anger, but with something colder, realization. The house I paid for, the utilities I paid for, the groceries I bought, the car he used without permission. Every comfort he enjoyed came from me, and he wanted me to disappear. My chest tightened as I thought about how long I had allowed this disrespect to grow. I had convinced myself that things would improve, that one day he'd realize how much I did for him, that maturity would make him grateful. That was my mistake. I finally understood what my role had become: provider, not parent. Income source, not father. I breathed deeply, looked out the window again and saw him laughing, flipping burgers on my grill, drinking my beer, surrounded by people who supported his disrespect. That was the moment the shift happened inside me. I wasn't hurt anymore. I was done. Truly done. If Evan wanted me gone from his life so badly, I would give him exactly that. But when I left, everything I provided would leave with me. I didn't need to confront him again. I didn't need to argue. I didn't need to explain myself. I needed to act. My life and his was about to change. And neither of us would ever forget what happened next. I stood in the kitchen for a long moment, letting the shock settle into something calmer. The party noises drifted in from the backyard. Laughter, the clinking of bottles, someone adjusting the music volume. While I stood alone inside the home I paid for, realizing just how far things had fallen. I didn't feel angry anymore. Anger burns fast. What replaced it was something steadier, colder, and clearer. A type of clarity that usually meant a decision had been made. I didn't pick up the cake again. I didn't reach for candles. I didn't look toward the door. Instead, I walked back outside without any of the birthday items I had prepared. My steps were steady, but inside, I felt a distance from everything happening around me. It was like watching someone else's life. Evan was still at the grill, flipping burgers, talking loudly to Tyler and Ben like he hadn't just said something that shattered 28 years of fatherhood. People were spread across the yard drinking and socializing. No one noticed me at first. Evan, I said firmly. He turned with the same casual expression he'd worn earlier, like nothing bothered him. What, Dad? You want to talk now? Yes, I said, privately. Tyler smirked. Oh boy. Evan didn't move. Whatever you think you heard, I meant it. I'm tired of you hovering and acting like everything I do is wrong. I looked him in the eyes. So you stand by what you said? He shrugged. Yeah, I do. You act like I owe you something. You don't think you do? I asked calmly. No, he said loudly, attracting the attention of at least 10 people. I never asked for anything you gave me. You chose to do it. That's on you. Ben nodded along, as if supporting him made sense. He's right, Mr. Turner. Parents don't get paid back for raising kids. I looked around. Guests were now openly listening. They weren't pretending to have separate conversations. They were standing in a circle, some amused, some uncomfortable, waiting to see how far this would go. 28 years, I said quietly, of everything. And I never asked for any of it, Evan repeated. You always act like you're the victim when I didn't force you to do anything. Maddie, still on her phone, said without looking up, this is awkward. Evan gestured around us. You see what I mean? He always makes everything about him. Always. He doesn't get that I want my own life. You live here for free, I reminded him. So what, he said. When you die someday, I'll get the house anyway. A few people winced at that, but Evan didn't seem to care. I took a breath. Is that really how you see it? Yes, he said. You make every decision like you're in charge of everything. It's suffocating. Honestly, Dad, if you disappeared, I'd probably be happier. There it was. The echo of the sentence I heard through the glass. Said again now, without hesitation, without regret. I nodded once. I understand. Evan rolled his eyes. Do you? Really? Yes, I said. More than you think. People around us stayed silent. No one moved. The party music still played softly from the speakers, creating an odd contrast of tension in the air. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. I simply turned and walked toward the DJ table near the patio. The portable sound system sat there with a wireless microphone. I picked it up and lowered the music volume. Everyone turned toward me. "The party is over," I said into the microphone. "I'm asking all guests to leave my property." A stunned silence fell across the yard. Evan blinked in disbelief. "What are you doing?" "This is my property," I repeated, "and I'm asking everyone to leave." Tyler raised an eyebrow. "Seriously?" "Yes," I said. Ben snorted. "Mr. Turner, come on." Evan stepped toward me, now angry. "No one is leaving. This is my birthday. My friends are here. You're being dramatic. This is my house." I reminded him. "It is legally mine, and I'm telling everyone to leave." "You can't kick people out," Evan said loudly. "Nobody is listening to you." Some guests looked confused. Others looked like they wanted to leave immediately, but were afraid of the embarrassment. "I'm giving everyone 5 minutes to leave," I said. "After that, I'm calling police." Several people started walking toward the gate. A few stayed frozen. A few stared at Evan for direction. Evan scoffed. "You won't call them?" I set the microphone down, walked inside calmly, and picked up the house phone on the kitchen wall. Evan followed me to the sliding door. "Dad, stop. Don't do this." I dialed 911. "Yes," I said when the dispatcher answered. "I'm the owner of a property, and several people are refusing to leave after being asked. I like officers sent to remove trespassers." Evan shouted through the glass door. "He's lying. Don't come. He's making it up." But the dispatcher heard none of that. "Officers are on the way," she said. I thanked her and hung up. Outside, Evan shouted at his friends, "Nobody leave." He's bluffing. But his voice cracked slightly. Not fear yet, just uncertainty. I returned to the sliding door. "Everyone needs to leave," I said once more, though no microphone was needed. "The police will be here any minute." A few more people left, but several stayed, his closest friends, the ones who encouraged his disrespect. Evan stood in the middle of the yard, breathing heavily. "You're insane. You're embarrassing me. You're ruining everything." "No," I said plainly. "I'm ending something that should have ended long ago." He froze. For a moment, nobody spoke, nobody drank, nobody laughed. The yard was silent, except for the faint hum of music still playing from the speakers. 25 minutes later, flashing lights appeared through the fence. 2 police officers walked through the gate. "Who placed the call?" Officer James Porter asked. "I did," I said. "This is my property, and I've asked everyone to leave." Many did. Some refused. He nodded. "Do you have proof of ownership?" I handed him the documents again. He verified them. Then Porter and Officer Dana McAllister turned to the crowd. "This is private property," McAllister announced. "The homeowner has requested that all guests leave. Anyone refusing is trespassing." Some people left immediately. The smarter ones. The ones with something to lose. But Evan stayed, his arms crossed, his jaw tight. "This is my house too," he shouted. Porter shook his head. "You live here by permission, not by ownership, and your father is revoking that permission." Evan shouted again, "I'm not moving." Porter's tone changed. "Young man, this is your final warning. I'm not going anywhere." Evan yelled, "Turn around and put your hands behind your back." Evan froze. His friends froze. Everyone froze. "You're arresting me?" "For being at my own house," he yelled. "Turn around," Porter repeated firmly. Evan slowly complied. The handcuffs clicked around his wrists. Evan twisted his head toward me, eyes full of disbelief and rage. "You're going to regret this, Dad. You're going to regret everything." But I didn't flinch. As they escorted him toward the patrol car, I simply said, "No, I won't." The patrol car's taillights disappeared down the street, and the backyard finally fell into complete silence. The music had stopped long before the officers arrived. The laughter died out as soon as people realized this wasn't a bluff. Now the only sounds were a few scattered footsteps and the rustling of plastic cups rolling across the patio in the breeze. Most of Evan's friends left without saying anything. A few muttered awkward, "Sorry, man," to themselves as they slipped out through the side gate. They weren't apologizing to me. They were apologizing to Evan in their heads, worried about what he might say about them later. The ones who lingered, Tyler, Ben, and Maddie, stood by the grill with uncertain expressions, unsure whether to stay or leave, but knowing deep down they should go. I didn't tell them anything. I didn't shout. I didn't demand they clean up. I simply stepped onto the patio and stood there, watching the last edges of the crisis settle into the cool evening air. The backyard was no longer full of noise. It was just me, the scattered remains of a birthday that never happened, and the bruising ache of what I had finally admitted to myself. Tyler was the first to speak. "Mr. Turner, look, we didn't mean." I cut him off. "It doesn't matter." He swallowed hard and nodded. We should get going." They left one by one without another word. When the gate closed behind them, I exhaled for the first time in minutes. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel proud. I just felt tired, completely drained in a way I hadn't felt in years. Inside the house, I walked through the kitchen without turning on a light. The cake sat on the counter, the candles still in the drawer. The frosting had started to melt at the edges. I placed my hand on the counter beside it and leaned forward, letting the weight of everything settle. My son had been handcuffed on his birthday, in my yard, because he refused to leave when asked, because he no longer believed consequences applied to him, and that, more than anything else, was my fault. I didn't sugarcoat it for myself. I owned it. I had created the environment that allowed his entitlement to grow. I had paid his bills, paid his rent, paid for his car, covered his groceries, fixed his problems, and absorbed his insults. I had allowed him to treat responsibility as an optional inconvenience. And in doing so, I had allowed disrespect to mature into open contempt. I walked through the living room slowly, looking at the furniture I had bought, the pictures on the wall, the carpet I had replaced, the windows I had repaired. Everything in this house had a story. Birthdays, milestones, holidays, small victories, big failures. But in recent years, it felt less like a home and more like a shelter for someone who resented the person supporting him. I reached the staircase and placed my hand on the railing. The tension in my chest had shifted from hurt to something else. Determination, a direction, a plan. Halfway up the staircase, I stopped again as another memory surfaced. One of the lowest moments before tonight. It was last summer. The day Evan called me in the middle of work, demanding I come pick him up, because the friend who drove him to a party had left early. I had been in the middle of a work meeting. When I finally picked him up 30 minutes later, he got in the car smelling like beer and anger. "You took forever," he snapped. "If you actually care about me, you'd answer phone when I call." I had apologized. I had apologized to a drunk, ungrateful adult man who had willingly put himself in that situation. Back then, I told myself he was stressed, that he didn't mean it, that things would get better. But tonight proved something important. He always meant it, and I always ignored the truth. Upstairs, I entered my bedroom and closed the door. I didn't pace. I didn't cry. I didn't get angry with myself. Instead, I sat on the edge of the bed and looked straight ahead. My mind wasn't foggy anymore. It wasn't frantic. It was sharp, clear, focused. Evan's arrest wasn't the end. It was a beginning. The beginning of the consequences he should have faced years ago. I opened the top drawer of my dresser and pulled out the folder containing documents I rarely looked at: property deed, insurance forms, recent bills. I placed them all on the bed and sat beside them. This house was mine. Legally, fully paid off. Every bill, every maintenance cost, every improvement, mine. Evan lived here by permission. He used everything by permission. He survived financially through my permission. And that permission had just been revoked. But I knew something important. Revoking permission wasn't enough. Not with him. He knew how to manipulate. He knew how to bargain. He knew how to guilt trip. If I simply told him he couldn't stay here anymore, he'd argue, manipulate, plea, or threaten. I needed something permanent. Something he couldn't argue with. Something he couldn't change. Something that didn't depend on emotions or discussions. And there was only one solution that fit. I had to sell the house. Every part of me resisted the idea at first. This had been my home for decades. But the more I thought about it, the more it made sense. The house wasn't a home anymore. It was a prison of old patterns and repeated mistakes. It was a place where Evan expected endless support without responsibility. It was the root of the entitlement he weaponized against me. If I sold it, everything changed, not just physically, emotionally, financially, practically. He would have no place to return to when he got out of jail. He would have no comfort zone to fall back on. He would have no house to mooch off. He would have no automatic safety net. He would finally have to stand on his own. I looked at the documents spread out on the bed again and knew exactly what to do next. I reached for my phone. On the nightstand sat a local real estate flyer. I flipped through it until I found the number for a reputable agent. Michelle Carter, someone known for fast sales and professional efficiency. I saved the number. Not to call tonight. I wanted to sleep on it, not out of doubt, but out of discipline. Tomorrow morning, I would start the process. I turned off the bedroom light and lay on the bed. The quiet of the house didn't bother me anymore. It felt natural. The right kind of quiet. A quiet without entitlement. A quiet without disrespect. A quiet that reminded me of who I was before I became an endless supply of favors and support. And for the first time in years, I slept peacefully. The next morning, sunlight crept through the blinds as I sat up and reached for my phone. No hesitation. No second thoughts. I dialed the number. Hello, this is Michelle Carter, Salem Premier Realty. Michelle, I said, I need to sell my house. Her tone shifted instantly. I can help with that. How soon are you looking to put on the market? As soon as possible. Next week? 2 weeks. No, I said, I need it on the market tomorrow. There was a long pause. That's extremely fast. May I ask why? Family situation. I said, urgent. She didn't press for details. I can meet you in 2 hours to evaluate the property. That works. I hung up and stood in the quiet house. Every step echoed through the space. No one asking for breakfast. No one complaining about bills. No one sleeping late. No one slamming doors. It was peaceful, and it confirmed I was making the right decision. Today, everything would begin. Today, I would take the first step toward the independence Evan claimed to want. Today, the foundation of his entitled life would start breaking apart, piece by piece. And he wouldn't know any of it until the moment he walked out of jail. 2 hours later, I heard a knock at the door. When I opened it, Michelle Carter stood there with a leather portfolio tucked under her arm, a tablet in one hand, and a polite but efficient expression that immediately told me she was someone who got things done without wasting time. Mr. Turner? She asked. Yes. Come in. She stepped inside, scanning the entryway with quick, observant eyes. Thank you for calling me this morning. You mentioned an urgent timeline. I'll need to walk to the property to get a full picture. Of course, I said. Take your time. She didn't take her time. She took exactly the amount she needed. Michelle moved through the home systematically, room by room, speaking to herself occasionally as she noted details. Updated flooring, fresh paint, good natural light. Appliances in good condition, backyard well-maintained. I followed her quietly, feeling strangely detached as she evaluated the home I'd taken care of for decades. At one point, she paused at a family photograph. One of Evan and me when he was maybe 8 years old, both of us smiling at a baseball game. You have a beautiful home, she said. Thank you. I replied, it's time to move on. She nodded respectfully and didn't ask anything else. Once she finished her inspection, she set her tablet on the dining table. Given the current market in Salem and the condition of your home, I'd recommend listing at $449,000. With the right push, it could sell quickly. How quickly? I asked. Under normal circumstances, 2 to 3 weeks. She tapped her tablet and looked at me. But with your timeline, I can prioritize this listing. If we move aggressively, we might secure an offer within 7 days. I'm prepared to pay an additional $5,000 if you get a signed offer within that time. Michelle's eyebrows lifted slightly, but not in surprise, more an acknowledgement of a serious client. That will motivate me even further, she said. Let's do it. We spent the next hour signing documents, listing agreement, disclosure forms, photography consent, marketing plans. She explained each step with quick precision. I initialed and signed page after page, feeling something loosen inside me each time my pen hit the paper. This was happening. It was real. The house would be sold. Evan's dependency would be cut at the root. Michelle finished her notes and said, "Professional photos will be taken tomorrow morning. The listing will go live in the afternoon. Open house is scheduled for Saturday and Sunday. I'll keep you updated every step of the way." That sounds perfect. Are you ready for buyers to walk through right away? She asked. Yes, I said, as soon as possible. She gathered her things, shook my hand, and left with the same efficiency she arrived with. As the door closed, I stood in my now strangely quiet living room. The birthday decorations still sat in the kitchen. The cake was still on the counter. The gift box with the watch still rested where I had set it down. Everything felt frozen, like a moment paused in time that didn't belong to me anymore. I gathered the birthday items and placed them in a large trash bag. The cake went on top. The candles, the banner, the streamers, all of it. I didn't feel sadness. I didn't feel guilt. I felt closure, a sense of dignity returning. By evening, Michelle had already texted, "Photo scheduled for 8 a.m. tomorrow." I confirmed and went upstairs to my bedroom. The house felt different now, not because anything changed physically, but because my relationship to it had changed. It wasn't my son's safety net anymore. It wasn't a place he could return to after leaving jail. It wasn't a home where he could expect endless generosity without responsibility. It was a financial asset, a tool, a step toward independence, both mine and unwillingly his. The next morning, the photographers arrived promptly. Michelle came with them. They moved through the house quickly, rearranging small items, angling furniture, adjusting lighting, and capturing dozens of images. When they left, Michelle checked her documents again. "The listing will go live today at 3 p.m. I'll call you as soon as we receive inquiries." "Thank you," I said. "No problem," she replied. "Based on what I've seen, interest will be strong." Her confidence felt reassuring. At 3:12 p.m., she texted, "Listing is live." At 4:30 p.m., first showing requested. At 5:06 p.m., second showing requested. By 9:15 p.m., we now have 7 showings scheduled for tomorrow. I stared at that last message for a long time. 7 showings in the first 6 hours. The process wasn't just working. It was moving faster than I imagined. That night, I decided to visit the county jail's public information office. I needed to confirm the details of Evan's release, the exact time, the procedure, and whether he would be given any additional assistance. I wanted to know how precise the timing could be. The facility sat about 30 minutes away. The hallway leading to the information desk felt sterile and plain. Behind the desk stood Sergeant Jacobs, a corrections officer who didn't look surprised by anything anymore. "I'm here to confirm the release details for Evan Turner," I said, handing him my ID. He typed quickly, "Evan Turner. Booked April 15th. Scheduled release April 29th at 9 a.m. Is that exact?" "Yes," he said. "Give or take a few minutes depending on processing, but yes." "Will he be given transportation?" "Only if he requests it," the sergeant said. "Most people arrange their own ride or walk out on their own." I nodded. "Thank you." He then asked, "Do you want to visit him?" "No," I said immediately. "That won't be necessary." "Understood," he replied. "If anything changes, visiting hours are posted." I thanked him again and left the facility. As I walked out into the parking lot, the cool evening air felt strangely refreshing. My mind was no longer clouded by guilt or obligation. For the first time in years, I wasn't thinking about how my decisions would affect Evan emotionally. I was thinking about what was healthy, necessary, and fair. By Saturday morning, Michelle sent new updates. 3 strong showings already. High interest. Possible offer coming this afternoon. By Sunday evening, she called, "Mr. Turner, we have a full cash offer from the Bennett family. No contingencies." They want to close immediately. Tuesday morning at 9:30 a.m. I looked at the date. Tuesday, April 29th. Evan's release day. He would walk out of jail at 9 a.m. The house would no longer be mine at 9:30 a.m. Accept it, I said. Michelle's voice carried a smile. Congratulations. I'll handle everything. That night, the house was quiet. Completely quiet. I sat at the table and wrote a letter to Evan. 40 words, nothing more. Evan, you said the best gift I could give you was to disappear from your life. I'm honoring your request. The house has been sold. I'm leaving. You now have the independence you wanted. Dad. I placed a letter in an envelope and wrote his name. Tomorrow morning, I'd hand the house keys to the new owners. And Evan, he would walk into a reality he created himself, sentence by sentence, choice by choice. The next morning arrived with a gray, overcast sky, the kind that made everything look quieter than usual. I woke earlier than I expected, not because of anxiety, but because the house itself felt different, lighter, emptier, almost as if it already knew it didn't belong to me anymore. At 8 a.m., Michelle sent a text. Bennett family is en route with their moving truck. Closing schedule for 9:30. I'll meet them there. I replied that I would be ready. I walked through each room one last time. Not for nostalgia. Those feelings had faded long ago, but to ensure everything was clean and in order. The kitchen counters were spotless, the living room tidy, the floors vacuumed. I had prepared the house as if I were handing it to strangers, because I was. The birthday remnants had been thrown out days ago. The cake sat in the trash outside. The banner and candles were gone. The wrapped watch, the one Evan once admired, now sat on my nightstand. I planned to take it with me, not because he didn't deserve it, but because he didn't value it. At 9:05, I heard the rumble of a diesel truck backing into the driveway. I stepped outside and saw the Bennett family, a husband, wife, and 2 young kids, standing near a U-Haul, talking excitedly. Mrs. Bennett waved. Good morning. We're so happy everything worked out. Good morning, I said genuinely. Congratulations on your new home. The kids immediately ran toward the front porch, peeking through windows and pointing at things. Their energy reminded me of a time when Evan was small, a time when he still felt joy in ordinary things. But I pushed the thought away. That version of him was gone long before today. Michelle pulled up in her car next, stepping out with her usual brisk efficiency. She carried a folder in hand. Mr. Turner, we'll finalize signatures in a moment. I just need to review the buyer documents with the Bennetts. I nodded and stepped aside. While Michelle reviewed paperwork with the Bennetts, I handed Mr. Bennett the garage door opener and the house keys. He accepted them gratefully. We'll take good care of this place, he said. I know you will, I replied. It's a good home. Mrs. Bennett then said, You mentioned yesterday that your son might stop by. You wanted us to give him something. Yes. I reached into my jacket and handed her the sealed envelope with Evan written in black marker. Please just give this to him if he shows up. Of course, she said without hesitation. With that, the handoff was complete. Michelle returned a few minutes later with documents for me to sign. Everything looks good. The funds will be transferred to your account by tomorrow morning. Congratulations, Mr. Turner. That's an incredibly fast closing. You earned every bit of that bonus. I told her. She smiled, shook my hand, and left to finalize the keys and documents with the Bennetts. I stepped off the porch and walked slowly toward the sidewalk, not looking back. Not because I was avoiding anything, but because I didn't need to see the house again to feel closure. The decision was made. The action was complete. I crossed the street and headed toward my neighbor Frank Bennett's home. Frank had been my neighbor for 15 years. We weren't best friends, but we were dependable to each other. Holiday waves, loan tools, small talk about weather and yard work. The kind of honest, steady neighborly relationship that never demanded too much. He opened the door before I even finished knocking. Morning, Mark, he said. Everything okay? Yes, I said. Are you still all right with me staying for a couple of days while I figure out my next steps? Of course, he said, stepping aside. Come in. His house was familiar in a comforting, unassuming way. The same arrangement of furniture, the same faint coffee smell, the same framed photos of his grandchildren. He led me to the guest room, already made up with clean sheets and fresh towels. "You can stay as long as you need," Frank said. "I know something happened with Evan, but I won't pry." "Thank you," I said. "I appreciate that." He nodded. "Coffee's in the kitchen, if you want any. I'll be outside working on the yard." I thanked him again and went to the guest room window, one with a clear view of my former home across the street. The Bennetts were already moving furniture inside. Their kids were running in and out. It was odd, watching another family fill the spaces Evan used to treat like disposable conveniences. But the feeling wasn't painful. It was closure. While watching, I replayed the timeline in my mind. Evan's release was scheduled for 9 a.m. The closing was scheduled for 9:30 a.m. The Bennetts took ownership immediately afterward. That meant Evan would arrive to a home he no longer had, a home he had taken for granted, a home he had never maintained, a home he believed he was entitled to. He would walk up that driveway, expecting everything to be the same. He would try the door. It wouldn't open. He would see strangers living inside. He would demand answers. He would be handed my letter. A simple, clear letter with no room for negotiation. "Evan, you said the best gift I could give you was to disappear from your life. I'm honoring your request. The house has been sold. I'm leaving. You now have the independence you wanted. Dad, no forwarding address, no phone number, no explanation beyond the truth he created." I sat down in the guest room chair, hands folded, waiting, watching, not because I wanted to see Evan hurt, not because I wanted to witness the moment of shock, but because I needed to know for myself that I followed through, that I finally ended years of enabling and stepped out of a cycle that had drained me more than I ever admitted. Frank stepped into the room after a few minutes. "You hungry?" "I made eggs." "No, thank you," I said. "I think I'm all right." He looked at me in a way that suggested he understood something heavy was happening. Maybe not the details, but enough to offer quiet support. "If you need anything," he said, "let me know." "I will." He closed the door behind him. I stayed by the window a little longer, watching the Bennetts unpack boxes in the living room. The same room where Evan had once said with no hesitation that he wished I would disappear. The irony wasn't lost on me. But this wasn't revenge. Revenge is fueled by anger. This was consequence. Consequences are fueled by clarity. For 28 years, I had absorbed every insult, paid every bill, solved every problem, and overlooked every disrespectful moment. Now all of that was over. And the next moment, Evan's moment, was going to happen very soon. I waited, calm and steady, knowing that the next chapter of the story was about to unfold exactly as reality, not emotion, dictated. From Frank's guest room window, I could see the Bennetts arranging furniture inside my former living room. Their kids darted between rooms, excited about every corner of the house. The moving truck sat open in the driveway, half unloaded. Everything about the scene felt normal, peaceful, and entirely theirs now. I kept my eyes on the street. Evan would be released at exactly 9 a.m. It was now 9:12. Right on time, a familiar figure appeared at the end of the block. Evan Turner, wearing the same clothes he'd been arrested in, wrinkled jeans, an old hoodie, and the worn sneakers he refused to replace, walked with slow, heavy steps toward the house he assumed he still lived in. His posture was different from the night of the party. Lighter? No, not lighter, just defeated. He clutched a small clear plastic bag the jail provided at release, the bag containing keys, wallet, phone, and whatever else he'd had on the night he was arrested. Except one thing would surprise him soon. None of the keys in that bag would work anymore. He didn't see the moving truck yet. A passing car blocked his view briefly. But when it turned the corner, I saw the exact moment he registered the large orange U-Haul in the driveway. He stopped walking. He stared. Then he kept going, but faster now, as if momentum alone could push away whatever bad feeling had just crept into his stomach. From the window, I watched him approach the sidewalk, his expression tightening with confusion. He stepped onto the walkway leading to the front porch, his former front porch, and froze as the Bennett kids ran past him, laughing, carrying small toys to their new bedrooms. Evan blinked slowly. His brows drew together. He tried the doorknob. It didn't turn. He tried again. Still nothing. That's when Mr. Bennett appeared in the foyer behind the glass. He opened the door slightly, just enough to speak, but not enough to invite Evan inside. "Can I help you?" he asked politely. Evan stared at him, as if he were speaking another language. "Who are you?" "I'm John Bennett," he said. "My family just moved in." This is my house," Evan said, voice rising. "What are you doing here? Why is there a moving truck?" Mr. Bennett shook his head calmly. "I'm sorry, son, but this is our home now. We bought it earlier this week." "That's impossible." Evan snapped. "My dad owns this house." Mr. Bennett's tone stayed gentle. "The sale went through yesterday. We completed closing this morning." Evan's face went pale. He stepped back as if someone had pushed him. "What?" he whispered. No, that's not possible. My dad wouldn't do that. He wouldn't just sell the house. He didn't tell me anything." Mrs. Bennett stepped forward with the envelope I had given her. "Are you Evan Turner?" "Yes." Evan practically shouted. "Your father left this for you. He said you'd need it." Evan snatched the envelope and tore it open. I leaned forward slightly, watching from behind Frank's curtains. His eyes scanned the short letter, then scanned it again. His mouth fell open, and his breathing shifted into shallow, shaky bursts. He read it a third time, and then a fourth. Every time, the words stayed the same. "Evan, you said the best gift I could give you was to disappear from your life. I'm honoring your request. The house has been sold. I'm leaving. You now have the independence you wanted. Dad." His hand trembled. The plastic jail bag slipped from his grasp and hit the concrete. His old phone fell out. A few papers fluttered. His wallet rolled toward the grass. But Evan didn't notice any of it. He just stared at the letter. This isn't real," he muttered. "He wouldn't do this. He wouldn't just leave. He wouldn't sell the house. He wouldn't just go." Mr. Bennett offered gently. "I'm sorry for whatever you're going through, son. But the sale is final. The home is ours now." Evan's voice cracked. "But where am I supposed to live? Where am I supposed to go? I don't have anything. I don't have a job. I don't have money. I just got out of—" He stopped himself before finishing the sentence. Mrs. Bennett looked at him sympathetically, but firmly. "We really are sorry. But there's nothing we can do. This is legally our home." Evan took a step back, then another. His face folded, not into anger, but into fear. Real fear. The kind a person feels when the ground beneath them disappears. He stumbled toward the sidewalk and sat on the edge of the curb, staring down at the letter in his hands, as if hoping the words would rearrange themselves into something less devastating. He wiped his face once. Then again, those weren't manipulative tears. Not the attention-seeking tears he had used as a teenager. These were quiet, heavy, unavoidable. For the first time in years, I saw my son feel the full weight of his choices. He stayed on the curb for almost 10 minutes, staring at the envelope. The Bennetts continued moving in. Life went on around him, but he sat frozen. Eventually, he collected the items from the ground, his wallet, his phone, the jail papers, stuffing them back into the plastic bag. He stood slowly, shoulders slumped. Then he walked up the street. Not fast, not slow, just directionless. He didn't look back. He didn't knock on another neighbor's door. He didn't try to argue with the Bennetts. He simply kept walking until he disappeared around the corner. I stood at the window long after he was gone. Not because I wanted to gloat. Not because I wanted to see him suffer. But because I needed to witness the truth. The moment he finally understood that actions have consequences, and that those consequences can take years to arrive. Frank stepped into the room quietly. He looked out the window, then at me. "That was rough," he said. "Yes," I said. "It was... You okay?" "I'm settling." He nodded. "If you ever need to talk." "I know," I said. Frank paused. "So what now?" "I leave tomorrow morning," I answered plainly. "I don't know where yet, but I know I can't stay here." He didn't question it. He simply squeezed my shoulder once and left the room. I stayed there by the window a bit longer. The Bennetts moved in. Evan was gone. The house was gone. The cycle was broken. I felt something I hadn't felt in decades. A clean slate. A real one. The house across the street grew steadily busier as the day went on. The Bennetts unpacked kitchen boxes, carried in furniture, tested light switches, and opened windows. Everything they did made the home feel more like theirs and less like mine. By afternoon, their kids were riding scooters in the driveway, laughing loudly in a way that didn't echo the bitterness Evan had left behind. From Frank's window, I watched for a while, not because I missed the house, but because I needed to acknowledge the transition fully. It was gone, and not just in paperwork. It had already begun changing shape. New voices inside, new priorities, new routines, new memories forming where mine had ended. Around noon, Frank knocked lightly on the doorframe. "You've been standing there a long time," he said gently. "Just thinking," I replied. He nodded, not pushing for more. "You're welcome to stay as long as you need. But if you're planning to leave soon, I just want to make sure you're ready." "I am." It came out more naturally than I expected. "Where are you heading?" he asked. "I'm driving west, toward the coast." "You have a place lined up?" "No," I said. "Not yet." He scratched his chin thoughtfully. "Sometimes no plan is the best plan. Forces you to figure things out on your own terms. That's what I'm counting on." Frank stayed a moment longer. "You did something hard today. A lot of parents wouldn't have followed through." "It shouldn't have taken this long," I said. He didn't argue. "I'm going to start dinner in a bit," he said finally. "You're welcome to join." "Thank you, but I'm fine for now." He nodded and stepped out. Alone again, I sat down on the edge of the guest bed and let the quiet settle. There wasn't guilt. There wasn't second-guessing. There wasn't excitement either. Just a sense of finality that was firm and level. Evan's tearful reaction earlier, the shock, the fear, the confusion, lingered in my mind, not to change my decision, but to acknowledge something new. Consequences didn't erase the fact that he was still my son. They didn't erase the past we shared. They didn't erase the years when things were good. But they did reveal something important. The boy I raised and the man he became were not the same person. Somewhere along the way, entitlement took over. Somewhere along the way, gratitude disappeared. Somewhere along the way, respect evaporated. And somewhere along the way, I ignored the signs. That part I owned. Still, this wasn't punishment. This was responsibility, delivered finally after years of delay. By evening, the Bennetts had fully settled in. Lights glowed softly through the windows. Their kids' laughter drifted outside, bright, honest sounds that contrasted with the shouting and tension that filled the house during Evan's adulthood. It was strange how quickly the house had found peace after he was gone. Later that night, Frank knocked on the door again, this time holding a folded blanket. "Thought you might want an extra one," he said. "Tonight's supposed to be a cold one." I accepted it with a quiet, "Thank you." He stepped inside and leaned against the dresser. I saw Evan walking earlier with that little plastic bag. Rough sight, but he'll have to figure things out. "He will," I said. "Do you think he'll try to find you?" "I don't know," I admitted. "I didn't leave a number or an address." "That might be for the best," Frank said. "Sometimes the only way some people grow is by losing the safety net." I nodded. "I should have realized that sooner." "You realize it now," he said. "That counts." Later that night, I lay in the guest room, unable to sleep. My mind wasn't anxious, just processing, the way an overloaded machine processes slower once the unnecessary weight is removed. My thoughts drifted to the earlier years with Evan, teaching him to ride a bike, sitting through school plays, helping him with science projects, driving him to baseball practices. Those memories still mattered. They weren't erased, but they belonged to a parent who still had hope. Tonight, I was someone else. Someone who understood that love without boundaries is not love at all. It's surrender. When morning light finally slid to the blinds, I knew what I needed to do. I stood, folded the extra blanket neatly, and placed it at the foot of the bed. My single suitcase sat by the door, ready since yesterday. I didn't own much anymore. I didn't need much. Frank was already awake, sitting at the kitchen table with a mug of coffee. "You heading out today?" he asked. "Yes," I said. He nodded. "Breakfast?" "No, thank you." He walked me to the door. "You sure you're okay?" he asked. "I'm more okay now than I've been in years." Frank nodded thoughtfully. "If you ever need anything, even just a place to sleep or a cup of coffee, you know where I am." "I know," I said. "Thank you for everything." He opened the door for me. The air outside felt colder than usual, crisp and sharp in a way that woke me fully. My car sat in his driveway, my suitcase already loaded. I took one last look at the house across the street. The Bennetts were eating breakfast at their dining table. The kids were talking loudly. The parents were smiling. Normal, healthy, peaceful. Everything a home should be. Everything mine had not been for years. I got into my car and started the engine. Frank gave a small wave from his porch, and I returned it. There was no goodbye. Not really. Just a quiet acknowledgement that life was shifting. Mine in one direction, Evan's in another. I steered the car down the street, away from a house Evan believed he would inherit someday, away from the neighborhood where I spent most of my adult life, away from the version of myself that tolerated disrespect for too long. At the end of the block, I turned right. For the first time in nearly 3 decades, there was no one waiting for me, no one needing me, no one depending on me, and the silence that filled the car wasn't empty. It was freeing. I didn't know where I was going yet, only that I was finally heading somewhere of my own choosing. Everything Evan said he wanted, the gift of me disappearing, had finally come true. I followed the highway signs without much thought, letting the road guide me more than any long-term plan. The sky over Oregon was a mix of soft blue, and thin clouds stretched like pale ribbons across the morning. Traffic was light. The direction was west, toward the coast, toward open space, toward a version of life I hadn't experienced in decades. One without constant responsibility, pressure, or the fear of disappointing someone who never appreciated me anyway. The further I drove, the easier my breathing became. At each mile marker, a layer of tension peeled away. The kind of tension I didn't even realize I'd been living with until the silence made its absence obvious. By the time I reached the edges of Lincoln City, the air smelled of salt water and pine. I parked near a small overlook where the Pacific stretched out beyond the cliffs, endlessly wide and softly turbulent. Gray waves rolled onto the shore rhythmically, as if reminding me that life moved forward whether any of us kept up or not. I stood by the railing for a long time, hands in my pockets, watching the water shift with the wind. I didn't think of Evan at first. I didn't think of the house. I didn't think of the past. I let my mind empty for once. Eventually, thoughts returned, slowly, naturally. I thought of the boy Evan used to be, the one who used to run into my arms when I came home from work, the boy who used to wake me up early on Saturdays, asking if we could go to the park, the boy who used to ask for help with homework and listen when I gave advice. I didn't know exactly when that boy faded into the man he became, the man who mocked me in front of his friends, insulted my support, and saw me as nothing more than a resource. Maybe there wasn't a single moment. Maybe it was gradual, like erosion. Years of small comments, quiet resentments, and unchecked entitlement wearing down the relationship in pieces. And I couldn't ignore one fact. I had played a role in that erosion. Not because I was controlling. Not because I demanded too much. But because I demanded too little. Because I rarely set boundaries. Because I solved problems instead of teaching him how to solve them. Because I protected him from consequences he needed to face. I sighed deeply, not in regret, but in recognition. Evan wasn't a villain. He wasn't evil. He wasn't beyond repair. He was simply a product of choices, his and mine. But now, for the first time, consequences belonged to him alone. I left the overlook and drove until I found a small roadside diner overlooking the coast. I sat at the counter, ordered black coffee and a simple breakfast, and listened to the quiet clatter of plates behind me. The peacefulness felt unfamiliar, but welcome. The waitress, a woman in her 60s named Carol, placed a plate in front of me. "Passing through," she asked. More like starting over. I answered. She nodded as if she understood more than I said. Most folks who come through here are. I managed a small smile. Seems like the ocean draws that kind of crowd. It does, she said. Cleans out the things you don't realize you've been carrying. She walked away to tend to another table, but her words lingered. After breakfast, I drove along the coast until I found a modest motel. Nothing fancy, nothing expensive, just clean and quiet. The clerk handed me a key with a plastic fob and said, "Room 12, view the ocean if you step outside." That was enough. I carried my suitcase into the room and set it near the bed. The walls were plain. The air smelled faintly of disinfectant. The carpet was older, but none of that mattered. It wasn't a house full of obligations. It wasn't a place Evan could barge into. It wasn't somewhere I had to maintain for someone else's comfort. It was mine, just mine. I sat on the edge of the bed and let out a long, steady breath. Freedom doesn't always come with joy. Sometimes it comes with silence. Sometimes it comes with a calm that feels almost foreign. I lay back, stared at the ceiling, and allowed myself to rest. A deep, untroubled rest I hadn't experienced in longer than I could remember. Later in the afternoon, as the sun began to lower, I walked to the beach. The sand was cool beneath my shoes. The wind swept across the shore. A few people walked leisurely, some with dogs, others with cameras. No one knew who I was. No one expected anything of me. No one relied on me. For the first time, that didn't feel lonely. It felt fair. It felt earned. The waves rolled in and out, steady and predictable in a way human relationships rarely are. I watched the surf hit the sand, retreat, and return again. The cycle reminded me of something important. Endings weren't failures. They were transitions. Evan would have to transition too. He would have to find his own footing. He would have to learn what independence actually felt like, not in theory but in reality. That wasn't cruelty. It was necessity. I walked along the shore until the sky shifted to a muted orange, then returned to the motel room. Sitting at the small table near the window, I opened my wallet and looked at the photo tucked behind the credit cards, an old picture of Evan at age 10, smiling proudly with missing front tooth, holding a baseball glove too big for his hand. I didn't throw it away. I didn't hide it. I just placed it back where it belonged. The boy in that picture was still my son, but the man, he became needed space to grow in ways I could no longer facilitate. Tomorrow, I'd keep driving. Maybe north, maybe south, maybe somewhere inland. For once, the lack of a plan wasn't a problem. It was freedom. I packed away the wallet, shut off the lights, and sat quietly in the dim room. I had done what I needed to do. I had given Evan the independence he claimed to want. I had reclaimed my own life in the process. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't emotional. It wasn't vengeful. It was necessary. I lay back on the thin motel bed and stared at the ceiling as the distant sound of waves rolled through the open window. Tomorrow would be a new beginning. Not because I planned it, but because it was overdue. Evan would face his own beginning, too. A harder one, but a fair one. At last, both of us were exactly where we needed to be. If you enjoyed this story, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. To listen to the next story, click the box on your screen. Thank you for watching.